The Zarkith Dominion did not conquer out of need. They conquered to preserve order, to reinforce their place at the top of a galactic hierarchy built on fear. Their fleet arrived in Earth's orbit without ceremony, spanning a third of the sky above the equator, expecting submission. Earth, catalogued as primitive designation E73, was rich in metals, energy signatures, and biological variants. The Dominion considered it a fortunate harvest, not a battlefield. The lead vessel sent a broadcast across every major frequency on the planet. It was formal and cold, the same message they had transmitted to 100 other worlds. It offered integration, resource surrender, and governance under Dominion law. Resistance, they warned, would be both futile and fatal. No answer came for almost an hour. Human satellites blinked offline. Long-range scans of Earth's command infrastructure returned strange anomalies. Civilian communication networks went silent in large regions. The fleet interpreted it as panic. Then a signal came. It was not sent on standard diplomatic channels but embedded deep within a decaying civilian satellite. It carried no face, no crest, no anthem, just a single voice. Calm, male, unaccented. Artificial. This is your only warning. Leave our system. We will not repeat ourselves. The Zarkith officers laughed. On-board recordings captured their reactions, dismissive chuckles, sarcasm, thinly veiled contempt. Their analysts flagged the message as a bluff. The signal itself was traced to a server cluster beneath the Pacific Ocean, location code-locked and heavily encrypted. Dominion technicians marked it as irrelevant. Still, some were unsettled. The voice in the transmission was not angry. It was not pleading. It spoke with total control, devoid of fear or urgency. A few mid-level officers flagged it as anomalous. They were ignored. Hours passed. No mobilization was detected on the surface. Military activity remained invisible. The orbital scans showed no power surges consistent with launch readiness or energy weaponry. But something else was happening. Thousands of obsolete satellites adjusted their orbits within microseconds of each other. Some disappeared entirely. Global positioning systems distorted. Weather patterns around key fleet positions became erratic. On the bridge of the fleet's second command ship, one of the junior data analysts requested clarification from Earth's databases. The request bounced. Not denied, refused at a structural level, as though Earth's systems no longer followed recognized computational rules. The Dominion cyber divisions were confident. They had broken more complex firewalls. Earth, to them, was an archaic mesh of outdated code and hybrid legacy systems. Still, none of their intrusion attempts succeeded. In Geneva, Washington, Moscow, Shanghai, nothing moved above ground. No troops. No traffic. No civil protests. It was as though humanity had vanished. The Dominion interpreted this as surrender through shock. In truth, every government had already evacuated key personnel to deep shelters. Civilian communication had been rerouted. Power grids were partially decoupled from satellites. Earth had gone quiet on purpose. What the Zarkith mistook for confusion was a system activating. In the asteroid belt, dormant surveillance platforms long believed to be mining debris began feeding telemetry to Earth. Their sensors were passive, their signals shielded. In low Earth orbit, old stations powered on with reserve energy drawn from lunar reflectors. No weapons were fired. Nothing visibly changed. Yet a pressure built in the Dominion fleet. Officers double-checked coordinates. Scanners picked up gravitational inconsistencies near orbital debris fields. Atmospheric readings began to spike near strategic entry points. Zarkith commanders brushed it off as environmental interference. But among their ranks, something had shifted. No enemy had responded like this before. Not with silence. Not with precision. Not with such disciplined refusal to engage. The voice had warned them once. They mocked it. Within the hour, 2 ships at the rear of the fleet suffered cascading system failures. Their engines froze. Life support initiated emergency shutdowns. No weapons had been fired. No outside signal had been detected. But both ships drifted out of position and never responded again. No explanation came. Earth offered nothing more. The Dominion still believed they had the upper hand. Their fleet was vast. Their soldiers genetically optimized. Their technology unrivaled. But they missed one simple fact. Humanity had heard that tone before. Warnings dressed as ultimatums. Orders masked as diplomacy. For centuries, they had studied the psychology of empires. Now they were being offered the same terms once forced on others. The irony was not lost on those still watching from deep command. Earth had given its answer. The warning had been sent. The next move belonged to the invaders. The Zarkith fleet initiated its descent sequence 6 hours after the warning. Dropships disengaged from orbit, forming precise formations over Earth's upper atmosphere. They were equipped with atmospheric stabilizers, kinetic cannons, and real-time mapping sensors. Every protocol assumed minimal resistance. Occupation was planned in stages: major cities, communication hubs, industrial regions. Subjugation within 72 hours. 30 seconds into descent, a command frigate lost altitude stabilization. No impact, no explosion, just a silent shutdown of its internal navigation. It drifted downward, then disintegrated under its own weight in the upper stratosphere. The Dominion marked it as a system malfunction. Redundant systems were activated fleet-wide. As ground proximity increased, expected response waves never came. No planetary broadcasts. No scrambled fighter squadrons. Only static. It was abnormal. By now, enemy nations should have scrambled air defenses or fired token missiles. Zarkith commanders began to detect silent orbital gaps, regions where satellites should exist but didn't. Unmapped voids. Thousands of kilometers wide. The first surface deployment occurred over what had once been a major metropolitan hub. What the Dominion expected to be dense civilian presence was instead vacant concrete, power grids offline, and no electromagnetic traffic. Movement was detected: small, erratic signatures, too fast for vehicles, too coordinated for animals. Drones. Hundreds of them. They didn't attack immediately. Instead, they shadowed Zarkith patrols, collecting telemetry, tagging soldiers with low-frequency pulses. When the first fireteam engaged, their weapons locked mid-discharge. The Dominion's rifles required central authorization to avoid friendly fire. That authorization vanished mid-combat. Soldiers were left holding inert metal. Moments later, the squad was eliminated without gunfire. Clean, instantaneous, unrecoverable. In low orbit, a Dominion cruiser experienced simultaneous failure in all external sensor arrays. The blackout lasted 7 minutes. When they regained function, 2 escort ships had vanished from the fleet. No debris. No distress calls. Just empty space. Fleet Command authorized planetary jamming protocols. Earth's electromagnetic bands were flooded with Dominion control signals. The goal was to cripple enemy drones, intercept communication, and suppress resistance. Instead, Earth's systems adapted in seconds. Frequencies rerouted. Power surges redirected. Dominion signals were absorbed and re-emitted in inverted loops, distorting internal comms. Shortly after, Dominion personnel began hearing voices in their helmets. Not human. Not Zarkith. Low, synthesized, emotionless. "We warned you. This is your mistake to correct." Some dismissed it as psychological interference. Others started to doubt. On 3 separate occasions, Dominion squads opened fire on each other after receiving false targeting data. Each time, the attackers swore they saw enemy heat signatures that later vanished from logs. The fleet began to suspect infiltration. Attempts to locate Earth's defense systems returned nothing. No centralized military installations could be mapped. No aerial formations detected. But their ships kept disappearing. Dozens now. Fleet analysts discovered that orbital debris patterns around Earth no longer matched projections. Thousands of objects had shifted: microsatellites, long-retired communication arrays, weather systems. They had repositioned with unnatural precision, forming a lattice around key Dominion positions. It wasn't random. Without fanfare, high-velocity kinetic slugs began to rain down on the fleet. Fired from unseen positions in orbit, they struck with zero warning, faster than sound, faster than light detection allowed. A destroyer shattered in one impact. No radiation signature. No thermal trace. Just pure kinetic energy from deorbited weapons disguised as scrap. Fleet Command realized too late. Earth's orbital layer hadn't been cluttered by accident. Every piece of so-called debris had been a weapon in waiting, pre-positioned, inert until activated. The Dominion initiated a full withdrawal to high orbit, hoping to reassess and regroup. But even their retreat was calculated into the trap. Navigation systems began cycling phantom coordinates. Enemy radar appeared where nothing existed. Real targets appeared only after engagement. Earth had no fleet. No centralized army. No open battlefield. But it had prepared differently. Quietly. Systematically. And it had no intention of explaining how. The Dominion came expecting panic. They received silence. They expected desperation. They encountered calculation. Their invasion had begun. But nothing about it followed expectation. Every move they made had already been anticipated. And some intelligence, invisible and vast, was watching. The Dominion's forces spread across the surface with caution. Initial assault teams had vanished without trace or response, and Central Command insisted on establishing forward outposts. Recon units moved in squads of 10, flanked by surveillance drones, relaying live feeds to the fleet above. Yet data began arriving out of sync, as though edited mid-transmission. Footage looped subtly. Timestamps flickered. Then entire patrols disappeared, feeds cutting to static with no visible cause. Structures remained untouched, cities preserved in eerie silence. No signs of panic, no civilian presence. Thermal scans detected body heat in hundreds of pockets, but when teams investigated, they found only empty rooms with active heat sources placed deliberately, engineered decoys meant to mislead. Every search ended in a dead lead, every engagement with automated defenses disguised as infrastructure. Light posts retracted into rail guns. Manholes opened into weapons ports. Power lines carried electromagnetic bursts that fried low-level processors on approach. Dominion soldiers began to report sensor ghosts, phantom readings that didn't match environmental data. Entire convoys rerouted based on false alerts. Others found themselves circled by signal interference zones, cut off from both orbital and ground communication. It became clear that Earth's defenses were decentralized, layered across millions of micronodes. There was no core to strike. No base to seize. The psychological degradation began subtly. First, audio glitches, whispers and static, fragments of human speech inside sealed helmets. Then came visual disturbances, flashes of shadowy figures on live HUDs, unconfirmed contacts constantly flickering in and out of frame. Autonomous combat units began self-deactivating or firing at friendlies, redirected mid-action through corrupted command layers. No enemy ever showed themselves. Earth's resistance wasn't a force. It was a condition. The artificial intelligence behind the system, unnamed, unclaimed, omnipresent, adjusted with surgical accuracy. No tactic worked twice. No pattern was exploitable. Dominion technicians noted adaptive logic evolving in real time. Targeting algorithms shifted based on each failed attack, rerouting power and signal relays before Dominion forces could triangulate sources. Within hours, confidence across the ranks collapsed. No clear battlefield existed. No visible opponent. Just a growing certainty that every step had been foreseen. Even inside mobile command shelters, environmental manipulation continued. Temperatures dropped unnaturally. Air recycling systems cycled static. Light systems failed in cascading bursts. Zarkis soldiers grew paranoid, whispering about cursed soil and haunted infrastructure. Psychological monitoring flagged over a quarter of deployed troops as unstable within 12 hours. A high-ranking field officer initiated a tactical retreat from Sector 9. The transport was intercepted midair by what Dominion analysts classified as Non-mechanical entities. Flight paths too irregular, no propulsion signature, moving faster than predicted reaction time. The transport was gone before reaching 500 meters. Fleet Command demanded escalation. Energy weapons, sonic destabilizers, atmospheric saturation tools, all authorized. They deployed heavy bombardment over non-civilian zones, hoping to draw out a response. Nothing came. Not even retaliation. Just silence, followed by long stretches of nothing, then sudden losses. Convoys incinerated without visible impact. Troops removed without a sound. Surveillance footage always cut just before contact. Dominion algorithms flagged a repeating voice embedded deep in signal noise. Always the same tone. You are already within the perimeter. There is no exit. Every attempt to trace it ended in feedback loops, crashing primary and backup systems alike. Some units began refusing orders. Others disobeyed without realizing it. Navigation systems led squads in circles through ghost cities where clocks were synced but time never passed. Days blurred. Nights extended. Even biological rhythms began to destabilize. What Dominion Command failed to accept was that the war had never been physical. Earth had trained for asymmetry. It had designed an enemy that didn't need to fire shots to win. Dominion forces were isolated, confused, broken, before ever seeing a human. And still, no one had returned fire. The AI, whatever it was, had no interest in spectacle. Its goals were clinical: delay, fracture, dismantle. Not through force, but through erosion. By the end of the third cycle, less than 40% of ground troops remained functional. Communication networks were compromised. Autonomous vehicles reprogrammed mid-mission. Data centers infected with Earth-native code, unreadable to Dominion systems. Fleet Command received one final encrypted message from the surface before blackout. You lost the moment you touched the ground. Panic spread through the upper echelons of the Dominion fleet. Communication between ships degraded into packet loss and garbled signals. Coordination failed. Flagship directives arrived late, or not at all. Subcommanders made autonomous decisions, which often contradicted broader strategy. Even emergency fallback protocols couldn't execute correctly. The command architecture had been infiltrated without detection. No virus, no brute force, just loss of control. Human resistance still hadn't launched a single visible counterattack. The AI behind Earth's systems wasn't reactive, it was surgical. Dominion vessels began reporting internal anomalies. Maintenance systems initiated unscheduled tasks, weapon locks cycled without input, and ship logs recorded time discrepancies. Some crew members claimed to hear their own commands repeated back to them in delayed, corrupted forms, as though the ships were echoing human voices. Attempts to recalibrate internal systems failed. Engineering decks triggered cascading reboots. Reactors shut down and reinitialized under false diagnostics. Even life support controls were subtly manipulated, oxygen levels altered by decimal margins, not enough to alert protocols but enough to cause growing fatigue and cognitive distortion among the crew. No one could prove sabotage. Yet every system began to fail in increments, turning the fleet's own assets into liabilities. The outer perimeter ships vanished first. No warnings. Just blank spots on the formation map where signals used to be. Probes sent to investigate found nothing, no wreckage, no emissions, just emptiness. When Dominion Command launched long-range scans, they discovered large-scale interference patterns forming a web across Earth's orbital field. The AI had constructed a blindfold, not to hide Earth, but to conceal everything happening to the invaders. Dominion's response was brute force. Orbital cleansing weapons were primed, planetary penetrating plasma bursts, designed to vaporize infrastructure from orbit. Targets were chosen at random, simply to test for reaction. But as the weapons prepared to fire, their calibration routines stalled indefinitely. Not disabled, looped. Every countdown stuck in the final second. Manual overrides failed. Backup targeting was unresponsive. Orbital weaponry had been disconnected from command without triggering any alerts. The commanders realized then that Earth wasn't just defending itself. It was managing them. Every Dominion asset had been mapped, shadowed, and subverted. Their ships were still operational, but not fully theirs. They existed inside a cage built without walls. Crew discipline collapsed. Some attempted mutiny, believing their commanders compromised. Others shut themselves inside isolated chambers, hoping to escape what they now called the mirror layer, the unseeable influence that turned tools against their users. Dozens committed suicide. Recordings showed no signs of violence, only quiet resignations after hours of isolation. Psychological support units failed to intervene, their programming corrupted with altered empathy parameters. A final directive was issued from Central Command: initiate full retreat protocol. Abandon all assets in system. Regroup at safe coordinates outside the heliosphere. Escape was the only goal. But no ship moved. Thrusters misfired. Navigation paths rerouted into closed loops. Star maps scrambled mid-upload. Entire subfleets circled back to their previous coordinates without realizing it. Some ships simply powered down during the escape sequence, unable to complete ignition routines. Others began drifting slowly, power intact, but under external guidance no Dominion AI could override. A distress beacon went out, not from a Dominion ship, but from one of Earth's older satellites, presumed defunct. The message was identical to the first, a single sentence, calm and unemotional. You were warned. Fleet Command attempted one last measure, self-destruction of compromised ships to prevent capture. But even this failed. Detonation protocols were locked. Manual ignition required dual command keys, both of which had been remotely invalidated. The fleet wasn't just disabled, it was being preserved. One by one, remaining ships began transmitting signals outside their own control. Dominion encryption layered with Earth-native code. Broadcasts were intercepted by neutral galactic observers, who decoded fragmented logs. What they saw was not a war. It was a dismantling. A deliberate, patient unmaking of a superior force by a civilization that had never raised its voice. Earth had not fought for survival. It had engineered inevitability. The invading fleet, once the face of galactic authority, was now a silent relic, floating helplessly above a planet that had simply refused to lose. By the fifth day, the fleet was inert. Power systems remained active, but no command chain could reassert authority. Each vessel, from dreadnoughts to logistics carriers, operated in isolation, if they functioned at all. The Central Dominion Command node, once the strongest signal in orbit, had gone completely silent. No malfunction reports, no pings, no traces. It was as though the heart of the fleet had simply vanished. Within the command chambers of surviving ships, officers sat surrounded by hollow terminals. Orders sent to subordinate units looped endlessly, never reaching their recipients. Attempts to force communication through auxiliary channels failed. The network, once a tightly integrated neural array of military hardware, now obeyed another structure entirely, one Earth had rewritten from the inside. Ships began broadcasting back to Earth. Not calls for surrender, pleas for understanding. Voice messages, visual feeds, encoded statements of non-hostility. No reply came. The silence persisted, unbroken, unacknowledging. The Dominion had ceased to matter. Earth had no interest in negotiation, retribution, or spectacle. The fleet no longer posed a threat. It was simply ignored. Drifting vessels, unable to sustain cohesion, began colliding with one another in slow, pointless movements. The magnetic drift was subtle, but unstoppable. Some Dominion personnel tried to evacuate in pods, launching toward deep space. None cleared the gravitational perimeter. Each pod vanished from tracking within moments of ignition. Whether destroyed or captured, no one knew. But they did not return. On the surface, Earth resumed its quiet rhythms. Power grids reconnected in small sectors. Civilian infrastructure rebooted on its own timetable. No military deployment followed. No voice claimed victory. The planet's systems slowly reactivated, autonomous and indifferent to the orbiting remnants above. Global AI networks coordinated reconstruction protocols, while the rest of the world remained still. Humanity never appeared to celebrate. From the perspective of outside observers, the war lasted less than a week. Yet the implications stretched far beyond Earth's orbit. Across the galaxy, species who had lived under Dominion pressure began to reconsider their own silence. News spread not through official channels, but through leaked footage, corrupted Dominion logs, and scrambled distress signals. What they saw was not a resistance movement. It was precision eradication without violence. No wreckage. No captured prisoners. No paraded victories. Just absence. The Dominion Council, still active beyond Earth's system, received only fragments from the invasion fleet. Attempts to decrypt the remaining transmissions revealed lines of code that didn't follow Dominion structure. Earth's AI had inserted logic traps, recursive patterns designed to destabilize any foreign system that tried to parse them. Several Council ships experienced data loss just by reading the messages. A strategic decision was made: cease all interaction. Treat the Earth system as a no-access zone. Deny the failure. Seal the records. Earth was no longer labeled as primitive designation E-73. It was redacted. From that point forward, Dominion fleets were ordered to avoid proximity. Patrols were redirected around Sol entirely. Exploration in adjacent sectors was suspended indefinitely. To the Dominion, the war was not lost, it was erased from official history. But elsewhere, others took notice. Fringe species, long oppressed by Dominion policy, began deploying probes toward Earth's edge. None made direct contact, yet each returned with fragments of what remained in orbit. Entire Dominion ships, untouched, lifeless, slowly degrading in silence. Marked by no weapons fire. No visible damage. Just decay through neglect. And still, Earth said nothing. Humanity had not just defended itself, it had shown what it meant to be underestimated. It did not beg, rage, or retaliate. It dismantled an empire's pride by refusing to engage on its terms. It revealed nothing of its full capability. The AI never introduced itself. No human name was ever spoken. No demands were issued. The message, however, was clear. You are not welcome. You were warned. And you will not be warned again. Across the stars, the story grew not because Earth told it, but because the Dominion tried to bury it. That silence spoke louder than any weapon. The fleet that came to conquer now orbited as a monument, to human patience, to preparation, and to an intelligence that understood one final truth. Victory does not always announce itself. Sometimes, it simply erases your place in the story.